In the 1970s and 80s, California was paralyzed by fear as a brutal and elusive serial rapist and murderer terrorized the state. Known by many names, East Area Rapist, Original Night Stalker, and the Golden State Killer, his identity remained a complete mystery for over 4 decades. Despite his horrific crimes and a massive multi-decade investigation, this man seemed to vanish without a trace. But in an astonishing turn of events, the case was finally solved using one of the most groundbreaking methods in criminal investigation: genetic genealogy. Between 1976 and 1986, the Golden State Killer is believed to have committed at least 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries across California. His crimes spanned multiple cities, including Sacramento, Ventura, and Santa Barbara, leaving a trail of devastation and fear. His modus operandi was strikingly similar. Victims were typically couples, with the man being tied up while the woman was violently assaulted. He often stalked his victims before striking, meticulously planning his attacks. His victims never knew when he would strike, and he was so careful and meticulous that police struggled to catch him. He was often able to evade law enforcement by using stolen cars and moving between different areas, making it difficult to link the crimes together. The Golden State Killer's ability to avoid detection for so long left investigators frustrated, and the case grew cold. For years, the killer's identity was a complete mystery, and with each passing year, hope of finding him seemed to diminish. His attacks were sporadic, and over time, many believed that he had either died or moved on to other criminal activities. But as the years passed, the case was never closed. The victims' families never stopped hoping for justice, and law enforcement continued to look for clues. For decades, the Golden State Killer eluded justice. Traditional forensic methods and the evidence collected from crime scenes never seemed to be enough to lead to a breakthrough. That is, until 2018, when investigators turned to a revolutionary new method: genetic genealogy. This approach, which uses publicly available genealogical DNA databases to trace the familial origins of crime scene DNA, changed everything. In 2018, investigators uploaded DNA samples taken from crime scenes to GEDmatch, a website commonly used by people researching their family trees. The genetic data didn't directly match anyone in the database, but it was enough to point to distant relatives of the killer. Through this technique, investigators were able to build a family tree and narrow down their suspect list. Eventually, they identified a suspect, Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer from Sacramento, California. He had lived under the radar for decades, never once suspected of being the notorious Golden State Killer. But through genetic genealogy, DeAngelo's DNA was linked to the crimes. DeAngelo was arrested in April 2018 and charged with multiple counts of murder, rape, and burglary. The investigation that had spanned over 40 years was finally drawing to a close. The arrest of Joseph DeAngelo shocked the community. DeAngelo was a man many had known for years. He was a former police officer, married with children, and had lived in the same community for decades. It seemed impossible that someone with such a normal life could have been responsible for such horrific crimes. His arrest sent shockwaves through California and the world, raising questions about how such a cunning killer had evaded capture for so long. Joseph James DeAngelo was a former police officer who served in small towns across California. After being discharged from the police force, he worked as a mechanic and lived a quiet, suburban life. To his neighbors and friends, DeAngelo seemed like any other middle-aged man. He was married, had children, and had no criminal history, at least none that would have linked him to the Golden State Killer's reign of terror. But behind this facade was a man who had committed unimaginable crimes. DeAngelo had been living among the very people he had terrorized, and his secret life as a ruthless killer remained hidden until DNA evidence finally exposed him. In 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to several charges of murder, rape, and burglary, admitting his crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case that had haunted California for over 4 decades was finally brought to justice, and the Golden State Killer was no longer an unsolved mystery. While the breakthrough in the Golden State Killer case was a monumental achievement for law enforcement, it also sparked intense debates about privacy and ethics. The use of genetic genealogy in criminal investigations is still a relatively new and controversial practice. Some argue that using public genealogical databases like GEDmatch to trace potential suspects violates individuals' privacy rights. Critics claim that people's genetic information should remain private, and that databases should only be used for the purposes they were intended for: research and genealogy. Others, however, defend the use of genetic genealogy as a powerful tool for solving cold cases and bringing criminals to justice. In the case of the Golden State Killer, this technology provided the critical piece of the puzzle that led to DeAngelo's capture after decades of frustration. The success of this method has led to similar approaches being used in other cold cases, helping to solve crimes that had seemed impossible to crack. The resolution of the Golden State Killer case brought closure to the victims' families, to the investigators who had worked tirelessly on the case, and to the people of California who had lived in fear for years. While DeAngelo's capture is a victory for justice, it's also a powerful reminder of the far-reaching implications of criminal activity, the strength of victim advocacy, and the importance of modern forensic tools in bringing justice for those who may otherwise have been forgotten. This case shows us the importance of never giving up on seeking justice, even when the trail grows cold. It is a testament to the power of perseverance, the brilliance of modern forensic science, and the incredible potential of genetic genealogy. The Golden State Killer case will go down in history as one of the most significant solved cold cases in criminal history. As always, thank you for watching and support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more thrilling true crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay updated with our latest investigations and detailed explorations of the world's most notorious criminals.